Welcome, everybody, to Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, Find Your Voice, Become a Better Storyteller, Get Published, and it is now a course at NYU and an elective towards the journalism certificate. Every week, I speak with novelists, with authors, with writers of every niche to talk about their tips, their tricks, their strategies, and how the sauce is made, including creative advice. I'll talk about essays and articles and share my own experience from 3 decades of publishing. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. And follow along on Substack, where I share special clips for subscribers only at estelleserasmus.substack.com. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, and I am so happy to have Rona Maynard with us today. And we share a very interesting past in magazines, but Rona's here to also talk about her memoir, Starter Dog. And you could see that I did my little Estelle thing of going through the book and noting different passages. So I want to tell you a little bit about Rona. She found happiness at 65, a story she tells in her new memoir, Starter Dog, My Path to Joy, Belonging, and Loving This World. She first broke into print at 14 with a short story about bullying and still receives fan mail from teens who are reading it in class. Rona capped a stellar career in magazines with a decade at the helm of Chatelaine, Canada's leading magazine for women. Her editor's column won a loyal following. When she disclosed a struggle with depression, she helped kickstart a national conversation about mental health. After Chatelaine, Rona had to learn to unwind and found that her best teacher was a rescue mutt who had received his basic training in a prison. She has been married more than 50 years and is a firm believer that road trips go better with a dog in the back seat. Welcome, Rona.
It's so good to be here, Estelle. I've been looking forward.
I'm really excited to talk to you about your book, about your background, about magazines, about all things publishing. So let's start with Starter Dog, My Path to Joy, Belonging, and Loving This World. Tell me the genesis of the book. And I know that, after a long career in magazines, and we're going to talk about that, you were looking for your next step, your next chapter. So tell me about it.
Well, I had written a book, another memoir, immediately after I left magazines, but that was out in the world. It was done. And I was looking around for a big, complicated project to fill my days, and it was going to have all kinds of moving parts. And I just couldn't bring it into focus. And I became a real pain in the butt. My husband was noticing how cranky I had become. He wasn't liking me much. And frankly, I was not liking me either. And one night, out of the blue, he took my hand at the dinner table and he said, "Let's get a dog." And I almost said, "Let's not," because I thought this was truly the most cockamamie idea. If we were going to get a dog, we should have got one years and years ago when we had a kid at home to play fetch. And we had reached the age when we should be traveling around and indulging ourselves and living in a home without any fur or paw prints. But he so wanted this dog, and I so loved my husband, even though I wasn't treating him very well, that I said, okay, I'm going to give it a go. This is something I've learned about marriage, that if one of you really, really wants something badly, the other one should try to get behind it.
I agree. I'm almost 19 years married, so I
Yes. Well, so it's been a while, and you know that sometimes you're going to hear these ideas you don't like, and you have all these reasons why they're not going to work. But if it's very important to the other person, maybe you should try. Just try. So I thought, okay, I would try. And I, at this point, had no plan whatsoever to write about it, except insofar as I write about everything. I had been blogging and I was on Facebook and I was writing very blog like posts on Facebook. So the dog just captivated me from day one. It was a whole other way to be in the world, one that was grounded in sensory experience, how his muzzle felt on my knee, how the leash felt shaking in my hand as we were walking, what I saw unfolding all around me when he stopped to lift his leg. The immediacy of it really did charm me. And I started writing all these mini stories on Facebook about what Casey and I had discovered that day. And in the beginning, they were only about a paragraph, but people really enjoyed them. I have a lot of writer friends, and some of them also teach writing. And one of them said early on, you know, Rona, you've got a book here. I looked and I thought, hey, I do. And I thought, silly me, that it was going to be easy, that I was just going to take these little jewels and string them together and I was going to have a necklace. And it really doesn't work that way at all. You need a shape. You need a structure. The reader's got to have a reason to keep turning the pages. And I wrote and I wrote and I wrote, and I had all these wonderful vignettes. And I sent it, I thought it was a book, to my agent. And she said carefully, you know, Rona, you are a really beautiful writer. Long pause. And then she said, but the reader has to have a reason to turn the page. And I'm not seeing it here. Beautiful writing on its own is not going to keep the reader turning the page. When you're inviting a reader into a book, you're taking the reader by the hand, and the reader wants to be comfortable with you, wants to know that this is going to be interesting, that it's going to be fun, that she's going to learn something, encounter some mind expanding surprises, have some fun, end up in an interesting place that she didn't see coming. And that was what I had to pull out of the manuscript. It wasn't there. I looked at it and it wasn't there.
And how did you do that? How did you excavate those emotions? It's sort of like Vivian Gornick, who says the situation in the story. So the beautiful writing is kind of the situation, what you're observing, what you're seeing, the little anecdotes. And then the story is what that emotional implication is and what the emotions are behind it. And I think that was the part that you had to navigate through, that you needed to include. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it is part of it. Every story is driven by a conflict. Somebody needs something, somebody wants something. And this is true whether it's Little Red Riding Hood going off with her basket or me going out into the world with Casey. There's an obstacle in the way. And at the end, The world is different. I think it's Cheryl Strayed who said, the unwritten last sentence of every story is, and then nothing was ever the same again.
Yes.
So I had to ask myself, and I'm making this sound a lot simpler than it was. It was not simple. Well, what was the conflict? What was the thing that I needed? I needed a sense of mission. I was writing, I started the book in a place of confusion, bewilderment, purposelessness, feeling disgusted with myself, and also fear of only having visited this world. That's from Mary Oliver. I'm not quoting exactly. It's her poem, When Death Comes. She says at the end, I don't want to die only having visited this world. I'm misquoting, but your visitors can look it up. Wonderful poem. And I was very much afraid that I was only visiting the world, that
What do you mean by that? Only visiting?
only only passing through, not fully engaging, not committing.
But you had engaged when
I
you were
had, but
in
I wasn't
magazines, you were writing columns, you were
on
connecting with
magazine.
readers.
I went to the office and it just came to me. You
Wow.
know, in magazines, there's no, oh my God, what am I going to do today? What am I going to have to show for my day? Well, you've got stuff coming at you all day long, whether it's readers launching a boycott, readers telling you that you changed their life, somebody from on high wanting you to cut 100 grand from the budget. There's one thing after another, and you go home feeling very chuffed because you did all this stuff and you're making the numbers, or you wouldn't be in that job. You would be turfed.
So it's the business element of that as well.
This just gives you a place and a purpose in the world. It's not all coming from within. You don't have to pull that purpose, that sense of meaning out of yourself.
Yes.
It is
Positional power.
positional. And by virtue of having this job, I was on every guest list, including the Queen's State dinner when she came to town. And I guess it did turn my head. I always vowed it never would, but I think it did. And then here I was out in the world by myself, and I'm just plain old Rona Maynard again. And what is it that makes Rona Maynard's day glow? Well, it is finding beautiful things that lift me up and enable me to make a difference. And sometimes it's an encounter with somebody that we meet who is somebody I never would have met at a podium representing the magazine or behind my desk or at some gala dinner. I met a lot of street people. I met a lot of tourists visiting Toronto. One of them taught me how to say good boy in Italian. Bravo, ragazzo. I'm not going to forget that. So I needed this sense of purpose. I needed a sense of fulfillment. And what is the conflict? Well, nobody was trying to take anything away from me. I was my own worst enemy. That was the conflict. In many stories, the conflict is within. We are not squaring off against the big bad wolf. We are not trying to outwit Rumpelstiltskin, but there is something in us that is preventing us from being all that we could be. And in my case, it was my inability to let go and have fun and just drift on the current of the moment and not ask all the time, am
Yeah.
I okay?
I'm going to jump in here because there's something that really elucidates what you're saying here. On page 186, you talk about like leaving Chatelaine and thinking about, how you are and then how Casey was. And I'm just going to read from page 186. You say, long after I left that job, people asked me what I missed, thinking it had to be the trappings of glamour, orchestra seats to the show of the season, invitations to important parties. I could totally relate as somebody who was in the editorial world for decades. Okay. They never saw me eating cold pizza while composing a letter to Mrs. Outrage. What I missed was what everyone misses who once loved a job and left, whether they taught kindergarten or worked on a shop floor. I missed showing up for the funny and the grave, the cranky and the preternaturally cheerful, my team at the office and the readers far and wide. They all needed me until I closed my office door for the last time. Then they needed someone else instead. That is the epitome of positional power. I had that too, having the title, and with that, the accolades, the invitations, all that. Now you're shifting. Casey had become my team of one, or was it the other way around? He had a mission. Unless I took him out, he would fail. He had to make sure that the rodents weren't getting out of line and no half-eaten burritos went to waste. This, not mere elimination, was the true nature of his business. If Casey could speak, he wouldn't call this ritual of ours a walk. From his perspective, we were on patrol. So it's so interesting. The mission shifted, even though he connected you with the other side of your nature, the gentler, more observant side that just let the world in. His nature, he was on a mission, much like you were when
Yes.
you were working in the office.
Yes. He was always on the job,
Yeah,
on patrol. And if he didn't succeed in his mission, he immediately forgot about it. If he lunged at a squirrel and he didn't catch it, and of course he never did and never will, he's on a leash, he forgot because that's how dogs are.
yeah,
And I once watched a dog in Tampa Bay splashing around, and he was trying to catch a seabird. And he never caught that bird, but he was just leaping and bounding and splashing. And it was all a continuous present in which he was about to catch the bird.
right.
And that is the wonderful, consoling thing about being with a dog. A friend of mine has a dog who's just gone blind,
Oh,
an old dog, but the dog is still happy. And what
yeah,
I said to her is, he is not worried about how much worse is this going to get? How am I going to live my life as a blind dog? He is not remembering when he could see and missing those days. He is, as a blind dog, navigating his beloved home with his sense of smell,
right.
and he is fine. It is sad for the owner because she knows that her dog is old and that they're getting closer and closer to the end of his life. But for him, it's not that sad.
Yeah. So Casey, who, like all dogs, like all animals, lives in the moment, got you to live in the moment and get out of it sounds like you were maybe in your head too much
Oh,
before.
yeah, totally in my head. My head is a great place to be. I really love my own company. I'm very interesting to myself. And for this reason, I'm never bored. But I was able, out in the world with a dog, to take in more stimuli and to meet people. This was very important to me because I was a rather forbidding presence on the sidewalk. I did not strike up conversations with strangers. I would often look right through people that I knew as if they weren't there. And it's not because I thought they weren't important. It's not because I thought I'm up here and they're down there. No. They thought I was stuck up, but it was not that. It was simply that I did not see. Because in here is just so much fun. It's interesting.
Well, I think, and I am one of the few people who can actually speak to what we're talking about. When you're running a magazine, which I did for many years, several magazines, you kind of have to have your blinders on. You have your focus on what needs to be done. And yes, you're in the moment, but you're always like thinking ahead, looking ahead, being vigilant. What do you need to, marshal the troops and work with every facet? And there is a certain intimidation level inherent in positional power. And you have to use it. And I have no problem using it. I never had, but it's not all of me, it's a part of me. It's part of my toolkit. I can pull it out when I need. And I think people are surprised when I do pull it out, but it's definitely there because I've had that life experience as you have had. So I definitely can read the intimidating elements that you must have had to have conveyed because of position at one point. In today's world, the idea is everyone's kumbaya, but that in fact is not the way that things were run or how things happened. There had to be a certain hierarchical situation back then. I don't know how magazines are run today. I still think there's hierarchy.
Well, there's hierarchy, but a lot of them, I think, are run virtually now,
True.
and much less going to the office and being with people and managing by walking around and being on top of how everybody is doing today, which was always difficult for me because I'm an introvert and I did not particularly like asking everybody how their weekend was. That just doesn't come naturally to me.
Because you didn't wanna have to tell them what you did on your week.
So I've always been an introvert. And even as a child, I think I was found a little alienating, a little forbidding. And that worked quite well.
Well,
Yeah.
didn't Paul say to you when he met you that I imagine that you would be hard to love? Did you say?
Did. You are a close reader of
Oh,
my earth.
totally, totally.
Um, yeah, he did because he saw that I was kind of a little bit standoffish, a little moody, a little prickly, and basically well-intentioned.
So it balanced something in him,
I'm
or
very well-intentioned, and I try to be compassionate, and I do have that capacity in case he brought it out, but it does not come naturally. And one reason it doesn't come naturally is that I grew up in a family where we were not taught to be kind. We were taught to excel and achieve. And we were not taught to walk alongside people. We were taught to be better than people because that was how we burnished the family honor. And I regret that very much, but that is just the way it was.
has anything unusual come out of this book process of, writing the book?
Yes, the book has really struck a chord with readers at a very personal level. I had wonderful feedback about the first one, which was about my mother and me, but this is more emotionally profound and there are more of them. I Other people who have had their lives cracked open by a dog understand completely what I'm talking about, and they're happy to see that experience honored because I'm not just speaking for myself, I'm speaking for everybody who has been transformed in a relationship with an animal. Everybody who understands that sometimes animals can give us what no human can give us
Yes.
because it is coming from a realm beyond words. And just last week, a reader sent me a pillow cover that she had made. She's a fiber artist, and she had designed a cushion cover based on the cover of Starter Dog. And I was so thrilled. Her work is beautiful,
That is so nice.
and she knows what she is doing. It's hours of work that went into this
Wow.
thing. So,
That's lovely. What a lovely surprise to
yes.
receive that. I wanted to ask you this because I started with service journalism. So I want to do serviceable tips for people. So, anybody who's trying to write a compelling memoir, what would some of your writing or organizing tips be for them?
Well, for organizing, get Scrivener. I highly recommend this software. It is a little complicated to learn, and I do not compose in it. By the way, it's designed for you to compose in, but I don't do that. I still use Word. And the beauty of it is that when you put all your bits and pieces, I work with fully formed chapters, into Scrivener, you can see all your chapters at the left-hand side of your screen in what is called the binder. And you can move them around at a glance. It
Yeah.
is so incredibly cumbersome when you're working in Word to get a sense of the whole thing. You know, people used to say to me, "Well, print out all your chapters and put them on the floor and look at them." Well, this doesn't work for me for two reasons. One, I've got bad knees, and I do not want to crawl around on the floor with my chapters. Two, I would need a gym to do that because I had so damn many chapters,
Do you have like over 30 chapters?
or even more, believe me. The
Well,
chapters are very short.
yeah. And you split them up into three sections, which also ties in with your subhead joy, belong.
Yes, I was totally lost until I started using Scrivener.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
I definitely recommend that your readers
Do
give
that.
that a go if they are lost.
I just use a word, but it's good to know. I tried Scrivener once. I couldn't figure it out.
There is a learning curve, but honestly, that binder,
Yeah.
once you start using the binder, is to love it because
I'll write
it,
it down.
it is the by far the easiest tool for rearranging your manuscript. And oh, by the way, the other thing is that when you're killing your darlings, you can stash all that stuff and you can actually see it. You can have a section called Darlings,
Yeah.
and you can see all the bits. So you know that they are not gone.
What about writing? Do you have like certain writing tips that you want to share?
I am all about themes. I try with everything that I am writing to start with one scene and really bring it vividly to life. I want to see it and hear it and feel it and touch it. And I don't have a great sense of smell, unfortunately. So I'm not very good at conjuring smells. But while I was writing Starter Dog, I recalled in my mind the places where that I was writing about. And I did not just start writing, the first thing I always do is picture it. Imagine that I am there. Now, this is rather difficult if what you are imagining is something that you don't want to imagine. It's painful, it's difficult. I wrote once in my other book about being molested in a subway car in Boston
Mm.
at rush hour, and
Mhm.
I became extremely agitated. It was deeply upsetting because all the physical sensations came back.
Uh,
And I remember before I wrote, I could see the face of the man who was doing it, who was jammed right up against me. And I could even see his arm moving up and down. And it was
Oh
so,
my gosh. I
I,
used to keep like a bag in between me and people, like on the subway or on the bus. I would always just have it in front of me, you know?
well, I did not, I was just a kid,
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
a bag, and I, I had to get up and I had to walk around.
Yeah.
And I say to people who have this happen to them, that is actually a good sign. It means that you are getting to the emotional truth of the scene, and you got to feel it, because if you don't feel it, your reader won't either.
Yeah.
Being real to your reader is one of my maxims. Show up
Yeah.
uh, for the reader, take the reader by the hand, take the reader right inside wherever you are. And you may write way too much detail. You probably will. You'll probably have to go back and edit because the reader is not going to care
Right.
about all those layers of detail. But really make it real to you, because it's got to be real to you before it is real to your reader. I do not do the so-called vomit draft. I know that many people swear by the vomit draft. I just can't do it because I'm very sensitive to bad writing, overtly bad writing, and I am offended by it as I go. So if I know I'm doing something that sounds bad to the ear or is a cliche, I've got to go back over it and I've got to fix it.
We're almost out of time, but what's next for you, Rona? What's your next project, or do you have a next project, or is it just walking Casey, which is fine too?
Well, I'm having a lot of fun on Substack, where I'm writing Amazement Seeker. These are the stories that are coming to me now. Some of them are stories that formed me, some are stories I'm now living. And in my someday file, those things I hope to get around to someday, there is a novel. And I have not started a novel. I have never started a novel, but you never know.
You
I
never know. I love that. That you can start anywhere. You can start with a starter dog. You can
And
start
don't be afraid to start in the middle.
in, what do they say? In medias res.
Yeah, start wherever you've got to see.
When I'm working with a student, oftentimes I'll say, okay, your start is like the middle of page 2 is the actual start place, because that's the inciting incident. That's the scene. That's the thing that if your friend is texting on a phone and you read it to them, they'll look up. Thank you so much, Rona. This has been wonderful.
It's been so much fun, Estelle.
Follow me at estelleserasmus.com on my website and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube for Freelance Writing Direct. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.